galactic purr of KKs
invites you to Space Cats Happy Hour.
Let your mind relax. We meet in a dimension outside of time,
Where the playfully curious thrive.
So go on, fill your tin cup chalice with the sacred elixir of creativity. Laugh till you breathe violet flame at the theme's absurdity.
and above all, let out your full-throated song with us.
Here at Space Cats Happy Hour, with the galactic purr of KKs.
Welcome to Space Cats Happy Hour, where I'm bringing bunny, rabbit, avatar realness with pink full moon coating, Easter bunny.
Yeah, baby. You're the rabbit. Oh yeah, Easter. I forgot.
Yeah, it's
Here we
we're
go.
recording this April 5th, the day before the pink full moon in Libra, and just a few days before Easter weekend. And as usual, I also have my, I can't show it because I'm in my avatar, but I have my little scratch on my palm. I always get a nice little, I don't know about always, but it's definitely happened at least one Easter before where I get a cut on the palm of my hand, like crucifixion. Like, I like to lay it on thick
Whoa.
with my symbolism. So I think before it was on my right palm, and this year it's on my left palm.
Interesting. And it just randomly happens. You don't do it like on purpose.
I have no idea how it
Okay.
happened. I was like
Weird.
walking out of my house yesterday or the day before, and I was like, why does my hand hurt? And it's like it
Oh,
came
no.
out of nowhere, like, which is like stigmata. I think it appears out of nowhere. I think that's what happened with the last one too. It was very like,
Oh, right.
where did this come from?
Mhm.
And it's not a huge, it's like about a centimeter long right at the base of my palm.
Definitely noticeable though.
Yeah,
It's
no,
like-
it's noticeable, and it was bleeding. Like I went on this
Oh my God.
bike ride and it was just like bleeding the whole time, and I was like, okay, well, whatever.
Holy shit. You really are on the nose with your messages.
Yep.
Amazing.
Which, okay, so
What are we getting into?
this episode, there's so much because we haven't been physically able to record in a while because we have been fucking hibernating and integrating and dealing with stuff. But there's
It's
been a
so
lot
much.
that's come through. So I'm just going to put a little table of contents. I'm going to have share an Atlantis transmission that came through about the Atlantis timelines. That was really cool. There's also something that's a little, anyway, there's something about, I've already talked in past episodes about being in the amusement park and the haunted house. So I have an update on that to share. And then I wanted to talk about human parts and things like that, what that means and what that's been feeling like integrating those parts.
So many fucking parts, baby.
Yeah. Okay. I think, first of all, I want to say the most soothing thing first that came through, which was, okay, so just a little recap, whatever many podcasts ago, they showed it to me this way of like what the ascension process can feel like for a lot of us, which is, you know, being in this amusement park that has everything you could possibly want, and you're walking around in that, and then you spot the haunted house, and then you're like, oh, that seemed interesting, and then you go into the haunted house, and then you like live in the haunted house. Like you forget that there's anywhere outside of the haunted house, and you start living in the haunted house, and you think that's all that there is. And your friends are coming in and being like, oh, you want to come back? And you're like, you can't hear them, you can't see them, they just seem like ghosts and spooks and like demons, like jumping out and staring at you in the haunted house. So the last time I talked, we were like right at the end of coming out of the haunted house, but we just kept looking back and getting scared again, and just kind of like sitting in the doorway and like all kind of seeing a little bit of the amusement park. And yeah, so that's where we were. I forget where that was a few months ago. It was still like that tail end. And so so the new update about where we are now is we're back in the amusement park, but what it was coming through as was like the ascension process, there's a part of it, I think, for a lot of us where we go through like our dark night of the soul, which is kind of hellish. Or maybe we start out from places where we have experiences that feel very hellish. And then we have our dark night of soul. And then we go through this period of spiritual awakening that's like you're learning things and you're getting all this stuff. And there's relief because you hear these things and they resonate and you're like, oh my God, it's true. You know, we don't have to live with these conditions and we have more power than we think we have and all these beautiful things. And like, you know, we're one with everything and all this stuff. But there's this whole like in linear time period of like looking at our own shadows and doing intensive healing and all that kind of stuff. That's basically, we experience it as a kind of purgatory, but it's always spiraling. So we're like always spiraling into more and more chill layers of purgatory as we go through. And then you can go back and like, you know, for a bit and like go experience, but like always there's this motion that's just propelling you into more and more chill layers of purgatory. And as I was going through that phase, which I thought would go a lot faster.
Me too. Oh my God, me too.
Which I think actually that concept will tie nicely into the human thing. But as I was going through the purgatory phase, which was like for me a big integration healing phase, I kept getting Dante sinks and like specifically whoever is the guide. I can't remember who the guide is who walks him through purgatory, but it was like
Virgil, right?
Virgil, yes, it was Virgil, yeah. So it was those things again and again, and each time I think I would think it would be over, and it wasn't. And then I started to finally get Beatrice Sinks, who is the one who leads him into heaven. So basically, whatever heaven or paradise, this amusement park, we're in it now. And they also refer to it as beginner heaven because again, it's like these spirals where we're in the early stages of it. So what they showed me is we stopped being in the stage where we're still in the haunted house thinking we live there, you know, freaking ourselves out constantly, but we're walking around heaven with like a blanket over our heads, kind of trying to shut it out and like only catching glimpses of it. And the reason for that is that it feels very overstimulating, even though all of the other layers had their own way of being really overstimulating and draining. This is also very overstimulating because it's such a shift from how we're used to experiencing lives as human beings. And
it's really interesting that you're saying it. I know I've heard you say this already before, and I'm like, I kind of forgot, I guess. And then I'm hearing you say, and it feels like fresh information, even though I know it's not. And I was like, just thinking about how I'm feeling that right now, where I have these feelings of invincibility where I'm like, what the fuck? They don't have any power over me. I don't care if I don't have money or don't this or what, it's like, whatever. And then I'm like, but I'm too afraid. It's like, I'm looking out under the blanket. Like I'm still too afraid. It's overstimulating to really embrace that frequency at this moment. So I don't really know why I had to jump in and tell you that, but I just wanted to get that out of my own head. So thank you for retelling me this. I needed to hear it again, especially after my crazy day yesterday.
No,
Continue.
Please jump in. And actually this is going to help because when I talk about the human stuff, I want to get into neurodivergence.
Oh,
and
yes.
One of the things that I feel like is sometimes when I get on a track, I can just keep I'm like feel this compulsion to just get it out to tell them.
Yeah.
And sometimes it like breaks up my
Me
just
too.
like I gotta get this all out in one breath.
Me too.
Okay. Yes, it's very overstimulating, and we're not meant to. Those of us who are on this version, which for me feels like an integration path, a path of integration, or some people have different words for it, but we're not meant to like just suddenly be all the way in and like feeling like put the blanket off all at once. Like it's fine to take our time. That's like a good way to acclimatize. It's good for if you have had trauma and your nervous system is recovering from that. It's good for if you're neurodivergent and you have like sensitivity stuff. It's good for a whole bunch of reasons, just for acclimatizing and not getting like the bends, if you think of it as like scuba diving thing. So it's all good. It's just like, it's the pressure that we put on ourselves to do everything really fast and be everywhere really fast. That's really intense. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. It's just like you said. So I was like, so it's like heaven, it's like it's an internal state, just like the purgatory was also an internal state that it would mirror out externally, but primarily it's an internal state. It's an internal state of when things are okay, you're still bracing for the next catastrophe and all that kind of stuff. This is a new internal state of like shedding that, and that's what's so different for us. And because it also includes shedding fears of things beyond what's currently accepted as possible, like it's so big. And that's why we like slowly spiral into it, although parts of us are already, it's like all over, right? It's not just one thing, because parts of us have like spiraled even further into it, and they're already at a deeper place, and parts of us are still maybe like in those stages of purgatory, still like little parts of us still in the haunted house, like.
Oh my God, this is so incredibly helpful, because this is exactly what I'm feeling. I was like, I know there are parts of me who are already there. I was literally saying this in the shower just before I got on with you to record. I was like, I feel those parts of me that are already there. And I'm like, can you fucking hang on for a second and stop giving me these invincibility feelings, because I'm not there with you yet. I understand that that's where we're going, but like, I can't, I don't know how to not beat myself up that I'm not all the way there yet. And I was like, I just need to calm down and remember that it's okay to take my time. This is such a soothing conversation. Thank you.
It's funny for me because I had invincibility feelings from the very get-go, like really strong invincibility feelings. And I'm in a place now where it's harder now for me to tap into them than it was then. When I was in the zone, I would be like so in the zone. And now when I feel it coming, I'm like, like it freaks me out more now than it does then. And I think that's something that I'm just coming to terms with, like literally like maybe this week as well, is like that has shifted, because I used to kind of like swing wildly back and forth, because I did like very early into my spiritual awakening, like I was able to do things that were like miraculous. And then that made me feel like everything had to be miraculous all the time, or I was failing myself. And I also was like still super in the beginning of my process and hadn't faced a lot of shadow stuff, including the fear of the miraculous and the void and all these things. So I would go like crashing into like terror and emptiness and existential, like not like feeling like I was dead and all those things, like the things that so many people talk about. But then I would like shoot straight all the way up back into the invincibility, which was just my path, which is fine. And for me, it did have its benefits as well. But yeah, it's just like,
it's a lot
right now. And so much of it is tied to our nervous systems and what our nervous systems can tolerate. I think way back when in one of my energy work courses or somewhere, somebody was saying that our nervous system is like the mediator between the 3D realm and like the etheric.
Yes.
So anyway, everything just constantly bombards.
Yeah. The self-regulation lessons have been super intense, but it feels so much better now being able to regulate, that I'm glad that I'm able to do that, even though I wish it hadn't been so fucking hard in the beginning. But it's fine. I mean, that's what the game was, at least for me. So
well, that's why I call it the path of integration, because I think there are people who spend more time as an anchor. I call it like bridging and anchoring or whatever, but people who aren't holding as many disparate energies and parts in them at once, to like polarized energies and parts is what I should say. They are holding all the parts and energies, everybody is, but they're not in a way that feels so polarized. So their experience of the spiritual awakening or just of being alive is more of an anchor experience. So they don't necessarily go through things in that like crazy up and down way, because that's not how they're doing it. They're just like holding a strong frequency and like beaming it out. And so it's a very different,
that's a whole different experience.
It's like so important not to compare your experience to anybody else's, because it's just going to confuse you. And no matter what, I've experienced being on both sides of it, it can make you either feel guilty if you're feeling like yours is easier than others, or despairing if you feel like yours is not working out the way that others does.
That is excellent fucking advice. And I keep reminding myself of that. And I'm trying to stay off of social media. I'm not actually staying off social media, but at least I try to remind, I'm like, when you get on social media, don't only get on when you're able to, I'm talking to myself, only get on when you're able to not fall into that compare and despair kind of stuff, because so many examples of people doing not what I'm doing, and that is awesome for them, but then I don't want to get lost in that comparison. And it's been the best advice that I've ever, I mean, people say it all the time, but like when it really hits your body, like, oh, right, my experience is different from everyone else's. I really do not need to compare myself. And then you can start to know, I've started to notice every time I get on, I'm like, oh my God, I'm comparing. Oh my God. And at least now I'm aware of it, and I can sit with the observer mode where I'm like, oh, that's what I'm doing again. And I can then sort of stay in that neutral place. But if it gets to be even slightly overwhelming, I close the app. I'm like, don't do this to yourself.
Yeah, well, okay. So here's where I wanted to talk about the human aspects, and especially like neurodivergence, but all sorts of things, because I'm going to try to be coherent. So one of the things I think that happens is as you go deeper and deeper into your spiritual awakening, you become more and more sensitized to energetic stimulus of all kinds. And so that can include anything. That can include thoughts are a form of stimulus, emotions, data input, visual input, colors, sounds, being around people and their energy fields, like anything, spiritual stuff, like, energy healings, clearings, going on journeys, big dreams, all of it is stimuli, and we become more and more sensitized to it, which is why it is a very common thing where you like have to slow down in a big way. So what you're describing, even the compare and despair part of it, for me, it's even more neutral than that. It's just like you're going online and you're getting stimulated by a lot of whatever it is. And the stimulation, it just shorts the nervous system. And that just starts old loops playing of like old stories like that feel very triggering, of like looping in our heads. And it can be like, that's why I find it challenging to navigate, because it's really hard to know when you've overstepped. And you don't necessarily feel the crash immediately. Like I'll have a thing where the second I'm feeling better, I'll jump back into everything in a big way. And then I'll feel okay for a while, and then the crash will come again. And then it'll sort of build and build. And then like, it's like 4 or 5 days later, and I'm back where I was trying to claw myself out of like obsessive thought spirals or panic attacks or things like that. And it's like, feels like it's just literally all just overstimulation.
Yeah. I'm right there with you for sure.
Yeah. And like, so that's why it's like these things, that these messages to stay off social media are not just like, or stay off the news. It's not because, oh, the news is going to be a bad story that's going to upset you, or the social media is going to expose you to something that's going to trigger you. It's like, it's literally just going to overstimulate you and make you more susceptible to your own crashes and triggers and stuff.
Absolutely.
And so that for me also really, it's just interesting, because I wonder how people, well, first, like, anyway, this is where I always get like, so it's hard for me to express everything, because I don't, it's like ultimately the way we understand something like neurodivergence, which one of the primary aspects of being neurodivergent is you are much more sensitized to stimulus and like much more prone to overstimulation. And the more they find out about stuff like ADHD and being on the spectrum, all this stuff, it's like chronic overstimulation, burnout, and other symptoms and other mood things. It's like it all roots back to overstimulation. But ultimately, I think that's because we're the evolution of the species. I don't actually think there's really anything, there's not like there's actual like neurotypical people who are some separate thing, that, you know what I mean? It's like, we're all just at different points on that evolution of becoming more and more sensitized. And what's interesting to me, and what I wonder about, is I can feel that there's a strong move that's going to slow us down. And we've been getting so much more in tune with the seasons, where like this winter I've never hibernated so much as I have this winter, and I've never felt like the need to rest so much as I have this past winter. So that's happening. But the other part of evolving as a species is we become in tune with so many more aspects of reality and dimensions and stuff like that. So it's like a weird combination of like slowing down as though we were going back to like an older version, a very ancient version of life on the planet.
Oh yeah.
For me, it always takes me to like the time of the dinosaurs, which feels very peaceful, or like the time of like ancient rainforests like a million years ago, where it's just like a lot of trees and a lot of like just little animals that live with the trees. Super, super slow, which is very Lemurian, I find. But
yeah,
then
I agree.
Now I guess this will be a bridge to the Atlantis stuff, but the energy of Atlantis is very fast. Things happen quickly, which is also how things have been happening for me on the more magical side of things. They've been happening very quickly lately. So it's like, again, it's that like paradox, non-paradox integrating. So like what it feels like we're integrating right now is like slow and fast and like calm and like a lot going on, like bringing those two things together in our little human bodies.
That is an excellent analysis of all of this, because I hadn't been thinking about the differences in speed, especially like life speed between Atlantis and Lemuria. And no wonder we've been getting so many Lemurian sinks, like the bears. I don't know. The bears to me always feel like that feminine led society. I don't really know why, but
yes. Thank you for saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Like super duper tied into, just being in tune with the seasons and moving with the seasons and living in this ancient way that's also the new way. So Atlantis feels very like, new technology and the new evolution and ways to connect and ascend and all the things. And then Lemuria is like, okay, let's live with nature. So it's combining all of those. I think you're probably going to get into it with the timeline stuff here in a second, but like, that's what I've been sort of navigating these last few weeks in particular, and why I felt like I've had that blanket over me in the amusement park, because I can feel that what I'm quote unquote supposed to be doing, because I keep asking like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Like I have, I know that I'm here to be doing stuff, and I feel like I'm not doing it. And then there's also parts of me that are like, you are already doing your job. You are here like bringing in the light codes. You are here to learn how to live with nature. You're here to bring back in living with nature in those seasonal ways, like the Lemurian lifestyle and that feminine led. It's equal balanced, feminine and masculine, but like there's a matriarchal way of living in that Lemurian energy that I feel like we're bringing back in a big way. But anyway, so you're already doing that just by tapping in. I'm talking to myself, Sarah, tapping into your feminine energy and doing the resting and the receiving and moving with the seasons, Mother Earth, et cetera, et cetera. And so like, what are you supposed to be doing? Like go out and talk with the trees, go out and take walks or do whatever. And I can't, my nervous system is still too overstimulated for, even though it's really great. Like I've done a lot of excellent work and I'm in an awesome spot as far as self-regulation and progress, whatever progress means. But anyway, I just feel a lot better in myself with, clearing out some of that overstim, but I haven't healed it all yet, because I'm still like, but I need to be doing. And so those little push and pulls of like knowing that I'm already doing by resting and just being and learning from nature and connecting with all the beings on this friggin' planet in the way that we were always meant to and just have been not able to do because of the false matrix. It's like, yes, you're going to be moving into doing things, especially all the things you've been here to build community and all, bringing in all the new technologies and all the updates to the society, all the things that you're doing, that's happening, but you just need to relax, because what that is also moving at that slow pace and trusting that nature and trusting your divine feminine self, because that divine feminine knows that everything is already provided for. It already is abundant, what you already have. And anyway, I think I'm kind of going in circles at this point, but it's just helpful out of my head, I guess.
No, yeah. And I think for me, sometimes this is what came through with when it was over Christmas, when I had the oracle reading. It was like, you have that beaver energy. Speaking of beavers, which I just saw a beaver for the first time in my life last night.
Yay.
But that beaver energy wants to work. And when it's a time to rest, if you have that beaver energy, you don't have to fight it, but put it towards things that you just enjoy, like making art, or, you know, like something that's like
Channel
like-
it into creativity.
like cooking, or like clean your house, or like do some crafts or whatever, so that your inner beaver isn't freaking the hell out about not doing anything, but you don't have to go push yourself to do something quote unquote productive for society, whatever. Like,
that was what I was dealing with yesterday for sure. I was like, I don't know what I actually want to do. And I felt bad that I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'm like, who doesn't fucking know what they want to do? Like, I'm creative wise, I've never felt as creative as I feel like I should be. And again, what does that even mean? Anyway, I was fighting my own programs yesterday. So it was all me doing it to myself.
this is also the thing that goes back. So, okay. I'm holding on to the threads. I'm going to come back to Atlantis and the timelines and Lemuria. I'm going to come back to everything that I said at the beginning. But to just go back to like autism spectrum stuff and neurodivergence, I had a big, since I was a kid, I've had crazy sensory sensitivities, super intense, and a lot of other stuff that was pointing to like, hey kid, you're on the spectrum, and you probably also have the ADHD, whatever that combination of traits is. Oh, and when I talk about this, there's something really helpful that I heard about being on the spectrum, is this: they say if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Like, it's really, everyone's so individual that it's not helpful, again, to compare or like, generalize. But this was back in the 80s. I didn't receive any kind of diagnosis. And what happens so often with people like that is that you, from terror and like sheer survival stuff, you adrenaline your way through life. And maybe you can't always power through, which was the case for me. I couldn't finish. I dropped out of what we have in Quebec between high school and university. We have this thing called cégep. I couldn't make it through. Every time I came to the end of something, I would have this collapse and stuff. I almost dropped out of university. But because I didn't know what was going on, I just kept being like, well, I have to fit these molds. And so the adrenaline would carry me like a certain part of the way. And then I would always just be burning out. And so I just, again, had a very big crash, and like hitting even deeper. It's only over the past few years that I was like, oh, this is a spectrum thing. Like, especially with TikTok, like so many people like learn that they're autistic through TikTok. And I also watched this TV show where this guy learns that he's autistic through making the show. Anyway, it's all very meta. And it was like, oh shit. And so there's so many layers of realization. But part of all that is also decision making is very time consuming and energy draining. And having so many possibilities and so many things, it just makes your mind get like freak out and go in all these directions and like collapse on itself. So as more and more possibilities open up to us with like what's literally, it's like everything is possible. Again, our neurology and our nervous systems are like freaking out in response to that. And that's why it's tricky. It's tricky because those aspects will also make you fixate on material security and like certainty and like getting past uncertainty. It makes uncertainty extremely hard to tolerate as well. It makes all those things that when you go through a spiritual awakening, it forces you to confront like how you tolerate uncertainty and how you make decisions and all that stuff. When you're neurodivergent, those things are like really tricky and difficult to navigate. So it's like, it really amplifies the intensity of the process. And having the whole world open up to you and the whole universe open up to you is like super, super overwhelming. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, it's like it all comes back around to not putting pressure on yourself, but then knowing that the not putting pressure and taking things more slowly means spending more time in uncertainty and tolerating more, like it's like all like
I'm sorry, nobody can see my face right now, but I have just been like, my jaw is on the floor, because even though, again, we have talked about this off air, like, I am just it is hitting my body. This is literally me. And I know that so many other people are going through their own version of this. And it is so soothing to hear you talk about this, because I am able to stop that inner critic who's just like, you suck, you are a terrible person for not being better, blah, 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 blah. So thank you for spelling it out in these amazingly just beautiful Gandalf ways.
And so that's where it's like all of this stuff about our little inner mouse, when in my oracle reading, that was like our inner mouse was having a death and rebirth process, but like he didn't go away. We loved him more and accepted him more. And the little inner mouse represented that like anxious, fearful, or whatever it is. Sometimes it's my inner chicken. It's like, I have to keep reminding myself, because what was happening was I would face these huge expansions, and then I would get really hard on myself when it felt like there was some kind of leap in reality that was presenting itself to me, and I chickened out and I couldn't handle it. And the thing didn't happen when other miraculous things had happened. And I would be so angry at myself. And I was just over this past week, I was like realizing that I was still holding those parts of myself as like something that were going to die away and go away. The parts of myself that got overstimulated, or that had racing thoughts, or that got anxious, or couldn't tolerate uncertainty, or were overstimulated, that they were somehow going to this process was going to heal them. But they're not meant to be healed. They're how we're built, and we're meant to be going through this exactly as we are. We're meant to be going through this evolution process and becoming this whatever future version of people. And there's going to be more and more future versions, but whatever the next one is, exactly as we are. So we're not meant to experience our spiritual ascension in a different way, in a faster way, or different way than the way that we're experiencing it. And that includes setbacks, because part of this process is knowing that setbacks are harder for us to tolerate, but that doesn't mean that we're not able to build resilience around them. It's just like knowing that reduction of stimulus is like key component, and constant. This is something, constantly pushing to expand further spiritually is not always in our best interest, and is just going to leave us feeling overwhelmed and frustrated and like really upset and like crashing and stuff. So yeah, it's really interesting, because the reason that I was having this big meltdown was because everything was building up again, like it did in 2021, April 2021, where it was like this huge leap's gonna have something big, huge thing's gonna happen, blah blah blah. And instead we had the feminine come online and crash all our systems and stuff, like all so much dark feminine energy and like earth energy and stuff, and we had to integrate it, which I think was actually what was supposed to happen.
Yeah, I agree.
It just wasn't what we were expecting.
Yeah. Again, with that uncertainty, it was like, spoiler alert, you know something big is coming, but it's not what you expect, and you're not supposed to know, because this is how the game is played for you. So
when it happened, started coming again for this 2023, and it's like big things are gonna happen, I just started to get all that terror again of like, what I felt back then, which was like, I failed, I fucked up, I ended up on the wrong timeline. It's funny because timelines come through to me so much, and I use the vernacular of timelines, but they also don't make any sense to me in another way, because it's just like everything's so fluid.
I agree. Yeah.
But anyway, I'm not going to go down a sidetrack of timelines, but I could open 8 zillion tabs during this conversation. I'm trying to keep it remotely focused and like understandable to everybody. But yeah, so I was crashing. That was what my big crash was, because I had a big moment in February where it was all related to financial scarcity and security. And I had a moment in February where there was a date in February coming up, and I knew something was supposed to happen. And then I did have a very magical, miraculous day that day. And I did get some money for my crowdfunding in a very fast way. And it was like more than I expected. And also I bought a scratch ticket and like got some money off of that, and all at the same time. So I was like, oh, okay, so it's supposed to happen like this. And then everything had been building up around March, and then I just felt myself start to freak out around March, and then like whatever I thought was supposed to happen didn't happen, and then I had like a huge freak out, which all brought me to this point of being like, whoa, you're okay. and brought me to the big like epiphanies around the neurodivergent stuff, and that those were like integral parts of me that just need to be loved and nurtured. Oh,
Yeah.
and just quickly, I just want to make sure it's clear, because when we're talking about the integration, so again, in previous podcasts, I've talked about how 2022 was the year of the tiger, and it really felt like major integration energy. It was like coming out of the deep healing work that I'd been doing for the previous couple of years, deep shadow healing work. And the message was coming through for people that I worked with in sessions too. It was like, it's time to turn yourself away from healing. We're moving towards more like putting these healed parts into action, which is integration, which also kind of feels very similar to healing because it's really intense to go through. So it took a while to stop the healing. It was like probably late summer that I felt like I was really not resorting to all my old. So it's like, you'll get the message, like it's time to stop. And then it's going to take a while. It's going to take a long while for you to actually phase out all the healing. And like the healing, it's not like you're never going to heal again, but it's like this major period of healing. And then the integration. So the integration and the healing overlap too, which was also very overstimulating.
Oh my Lord. Absolutely.
And then the integration continued. And then it was like, okay, it's 2023. It's moving from the tiger to the rabbit. And so it's moving out of that integration energy. And again, it feels like it's going to take quite a long time into 2023 before we really feel like we've moved out of using all our old techniques of integrating, which are also very overstimulating. And like, mostly it's just letting things be and not feeling like you have to, everything needs to be like fixed or attended to, or like a big process to, it's like, it's more and more, it's just like, yep, it's coming through and I don't have to do anything. I don't have to do anything. It's like that. It's like, oh, just let it move through. It's okay. Don't have to turn this into a big like process of that's like very, very draining, even though it's fine to do that, but it's like more and more, we just don't need to.
Yeah.
Gradually. So
this is so helpful.
So I think that's why the rabbit is so fast, because it's only coming in little fits and bursts. Like, so it does what it has to do really fast when it does come in. It's like, because we're still overlap. Like everything is just this long overlap process and stuff. And if it still moves beyond, like right now, it feels like July, August is when I will personally be out of this place of like overstimulation from integration and just feel a bit more centered and calm and just chill in my life. But it could take longer than that, because that's okay. Which is why the paradise part or whatever is so internal, because it's like, it is that unconditional acceptance. It is that part of spirituality where people are like, the spiritual path is just loving and accepting every part of yourself and your reality.
I really like that you said that too, because I had heard along my healing path, you know, at whatever points, I mean, this is actually kind of recently now that I'm thinking about it, that I heard this part. It was like, when you're healing your parts and finding them and bringing them home, which is what we've been doing, the parts that are wounded or, you know, split off or, you know, whatever, because they're holding the trauma and the overstim or whatever, they don't trust the higher self because they've been cut off from that loving energy for so long. And so building a relationship with them is super important. And by doing that, you build that trust. Like you talk to them, you observe that, you witness them, and you listen to them. And they can, just like you can when you're talking to a friend and they're not hearing you necessarily. All you need is like somebody to hear your story, not give you advice or try to fix you or, you know, have this agenda of, you know, whatever, you just need some comfort. Like your parts can sense if you have an agenda, like if I can heal this part of me, I won't feel this way, or I'll be successful, or I will get money, or, you know, whatever your agenda is of like, I gotta be whole and these parts better come in here or else. That's an agenda you shouldn't be having with it. It's like, you just notice them and talk to them and witness whatever their stories are. And I needed to hear you say exactly what you just said about the parts, the inner mouse and the parts where we're not meant to experience we're in this evolution where there are parts of us who are just going to feel that overstimulated or insecure or, you know, anyway, exactly what you just fucking said. I don't need to repeat it or whatever, but it's like, those parts don't need to heal necessarily. It's like, let them be. They
It's
don't have to be a certain way for you to be this whole person, this part of the evolution. It's like, anyway, just leaving some of those dangling isn't bad. It is how we move through this in the easiest, most graceful way. And that was not in my awareness until I heard you say that. Like, even though it was in my, I think it's what I'm saying is you Gandalfed me basically. I was like, okay, yeah, now I get it, where it's like, just allow those parts to be and not attach this deadline of healing or some shit like that. It's okay to just, anyway, thank you for saying all of that. It helped a lot.
Yeah, because they're not going to be left behind. Nothing is getting left behind. And those parts, the parts of us that we feel the most separate and that feel the most whatever fractured or disconnected or whatever they feel, are just as, there's no difference between them ultimately, between them and our parts that feel the most unified. So they don't have to do anything. They can just be themselves. And they're not going to be left behind. They're not going to be punished. And that's, again, that's where it's like, I find it hard to communicate, because it's like the external reality eventually, and I'm already feeling it, it does become gentler. There is a shift eventually in the external reality that matches that is what like someone like Jess is talking about, when we're moving out of karmic reality of like, where we have to play, like if we play one side of the experience, we have to play the other, or if we do something, it has to set this in motion, like that no longer becomes true. And I'm feeling that very much in my day-to-day life, like old relational things where I would have had to justify some aspect of myself or something like that. I no longer have to do that with people in my life that I'm very close to, that I've had like these issues with for long. Like those things are changing. Like I'm actually seeing tangible changes. And why I find it so hard to talk about that part is because it's really hard for those parts of us to hear that and then not put an expectation on themselves and not turn that into like something to like bludgeon. It's like the kindest thing. It's like, no, you're not going to be left behind, and you're going to experience a more gentle reality, but without turning that into like, and that has to happen in every part of your life always, or else you failed, and it has to happen soon. It has to happen this lifetime for every, it's like, then we turn it into like another thing to like crush ourselves with as like some, monstrous goal or whatever. It's just like, we're simply being magnetically drawn towards it. What was the critical mass? We've achieved the critical mass of like whichever parts of ourselves are existing in a zone that has more of a sense of self-acceptance and compassion and love and peacefulness to it, is at a critical mass and is just pulling like
us downhill.
Overpowering magnetic pull for the parts that are like having trouble believing it and stuff into itself.
That makes sense. I can feel that for sure. Even though part of me is like the parts of me that aren't at that, they're fighting that like, no, man, it's not that easy. What are you talking about? It's got to be hard. It's like, no, just let it pull you downhill.
Well, that's the other aspect is, there's so many aspects, and that's why we get so overstimulated and like we start to short circuit, because it's like there's so many ways of looking at it, and there's always so many other aspects to draw in, because there's the part of us that enjoys the friction of the struggle and all that thing, those parts that don't want to let go, and so they're like
That's
holding
true.
on like from an attraction, whatever. I won't use the word enjoy because it's too like, it's not really zoomed out enough for me, but it's like an attraction again on the level of a magnetic attraction, just like feeling pulled in, a reason to be pulled into those types of experiences. And so we do continue to experience whatever friction or obstacles or things like that, and because of the parts of us that have that pull towards them, we're probably going to continue to experience some form of that friction or whatever in different areas of our life or at different points as well, just because it's like there's that pull, and we can call it enjoying or we can call it pull or whatever, and it's like that's okay too. But
just observe it. Don't have to attach anything to it. Man, that
Yeah.
observer mode it's like observer mode gets easier, but also not harder. I don't know. It's like in everything. And
Okay, this draws me to another thing,
oh yeah, let's hear it.
which is like just going through a thing today around acceptance of. So again, it's holding these two things at the same time and then allowing them both to be, and like one doesn't have to overpower the other. Because again, I I've experienced firsthand, and I know that you don't always have to accept the circumstances that you're presented with. You can just be like, or not accept the circumstances that you're presented with, but you don't have to accept like a potential timeline that's being presented to you. You can be like, no, I don't feel that. Or you can take a path of like, okay, I accept, and I know it's still going to be okay, like whatever. I mean, or you can take a path of like resistance, which I've done a million times, kicking and screaming and being like, I'm freaked out. But holding those two things has been so hard for me, of knowing, for me personally, when I'm being asked by my path to accept, just like be like, okay, accept whatever thing that feels scary or unpleasant or whatever, accept it and like allow it to just play out and stop trying to fight it, or when to just be like, nope, that doesn't feel true for me. Oh, and it's not true for me, and it wasn't true for me, and it's fine, and we move through. I would say when I'm traveling, it's much more easy for me to tap into that part of myself that like sets the agenda and is very commanding of my reality and is like, this is what has to happen. But again, the fact that those two things exist, it's that integration part where you're like, well, if I can do that, why wouldn't I just do that with anything that I didn't want to experience? And it's like really hard to tap into the acceptance when it's like, well, why isn't it working this time, and why can't I do that? Anyway, that whole thing has been a big long journey, and I was just working through some further acceptance around loss, because, and I totally see the value around accepting the acceptance path and the path of accepting like loss and accepting whatever, but I was just going through another thing around it that had to do with like change and transformation. There's things that we think we perceive as a loss, and it's like we fight it so hard, and then like it's really just part of this change and transformation that brings something new in, and I spent all of my time just like fighting and resisting and like being so upset at myself for not being able to change the loss, or like trying to go back and fix it, or trying to figure out a way that it will not have happened, or it will be immediately fixed or whatever, that I was really resistant. And today I was coming to some further acceptance of like some choices that I made and the results that happened from those choices financially, and like being like, okay, that's done, and I can stop hoping that it's going to somehow be undone. But that was very hard when I personally had experienced moments where I was able to pivot completely away from unpleasant experience of loss that I didn't want to have. And the thing that initially came through that was very true was like, it's when you feel that certainty, that's when you take that path. You feel that certainty inside and you're just like, nope, it's going to be okay. And when you feel the uncertainty, it's better to go for acceptance, just accept what is and just go that route. But it's like, I don't know how long it's been since that came through as like the answer to that question. And I'm still having trouble. I still try to resolve everything in the mental space and get like spiral into like overstimulation and stuff.
That overstim. Whoo boy.
But that's why, okay, the reason I brought that up is that's why certain things in spirituality, when people would talk about like radical acceptance, they didn't always feel true to me, because I had experienced these times where it was like, no, you don't, accepting was not the path for me. It was like, and the acceptance was what I knew to be true, which was different from what reality was saying to be true. So it's like, there's just so many freaking layers,
experiences. Experiences and layers, and everybody has a different perspective, and it's good to share your perspective, but also don't take it on as like the be all end all. You're going to have your own perspective. It's like that mirror ball thing where we're all pieces of that mirror ball, and we're looking at the same room, just different parts of the room. So not everybody is describing accurately the room, even though it's different from everyone else's. There's going to be overlap with your next door neighbor or, whatever, but it's definitely not going to be the exact same thing. And so hear other people's perspectives and viewpoints and their experiences, but then also know that you're going to be doing your own unique thing, which is why everybody says, take what resonates and leave the rest. And it's just really valuable to keep that in mind. And it's kind of like I think we're going through where some of the earlier, like whatever our wave of awakening is, we're going through what feels like a very difficult way of experiencing it. But so I don't think that maybe people listening to this at whatever time they're listening to this, it's not going to be as hard for them, but they're still going to see some overlap or some similarities and be like, oh, I'm glad it wasn't as hard as what they're describing, but at least, but still maybe it is hard for them too. And they're like, oh, I'm grateful that somebody else is describing how fucking hard this is in the exact way or similar ways that I'm experiencing it. So.
Okay. And the reason I started off on that thing that kind of went, it's because as I was
into
going,
Atlantis.
Yes, as I was going
Okay.
through my thing today, which was acceptance of the loss and not trying to change the past. It's like my brain, for ease and clarity, is always looking for the mantra that I can rely on to guide me. And so I was like, okay, so I was like, I think for me, this is telling me that it's better for me not to try and change the past, not to try to put my efforts towards changing the past or undoing the past, which is mostly how I feel anyway. That always feels kind of draining to me. I think I've had lifetimes where just knowing that there are infinite realities possible and you can potentially hop over to a version of the reality where that thing hasn't happened, kind of like tortured myself, always looking for the ideal timeline or whatever to be on, like the version of reality where it was like, oh, that thing that was really upsetting to me or it felt really catastrophic, it didn't happen and it's okay. So I was going through an acceptance today of loss, and that as I said, my brain was trying to create like one rule, but so then my brain wants to create that into like leave the past in the past, and like that's not really what reality jumping is about. However, what I've noticed is that when I shift realities, it's often something that's already happened that's different. And I often find myself like at a collective level too. If I see a collective shift, it's like, oh, we already, like something did change in the past, because suddenly I'm on a timeline where, just to give my example, first one that happened to me before I was really into my awakening, when my mom was sick and in the hospital, and I went to be with her in Montreal, and suddenly from one day to the next, I was walking down the street to get to the hospital, and there were posters about this huge climate rally of like 500,000 people, which is like massive for Montreal. It's a small city. And it hadn't existed before. I was just suddenly, it was coming up like within a few days, and I hadn't heard a thing about it. And then there were posters everywhere. So it was a shift, like people had planned it, and it had been, and Greta Thunberg was speaking. It was a shift to the past. Or anyway, there have been others where it's like, oh, we already found this solution to something that was a problem and whatever. It's like that non-linearity of time. Anyway, basically, it also sort of, it kind of ties in with the Atlantis thing, because with this magnetic pull that's like gathering all of our parts into itself, when those parts are gathered in, it changes, the ripple effect goes out across all time directions. And so it inevitably ends up affecting the past. But I think what's the difference is that you're not chasing after it.
It's
you're
already
like,
happened, and it just
yeah, it's just like you work on the present and then you work from the present or whatever, and then you just allow the ripples to happen without, I don't know, going chasing after them or something. It's like something like the difference between time travel, where you're like trying to, you know, do something like stop Hitler or whatever, to internal time travel that we do when we bring more love and compassion to ourselves. Anyway, it ripples all the way out. I think some of this is just coming to me now, and it's a bit new, so I'm not experienced. I don't even know what I'm kind of trying to.
I can feel the channel open. It's pretty funny. I'm like,
Express
we're floating.
Yeah. It's just, it's something in progress. This is something in progress that's coming through about the past and stuff. But it felt more peaceful. It definitely felt more peaceful for me today to just accept some financial losses and just be like, they're done. We're done. It's gone. That money is gone. It's okay. Like, I feel like I've gone too nebulous and I'm not making any sense anymore.
That's okay. We can just take a little breather. It's making some sense, but I understand, like, I do feel like we're floating. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. It's pretty funny.
I mean, I think it's like, I can feel when I'm talking to the parts of myself and the parts of other people that are more rooted in our current reality. And so that I'm talking in a way that's more comprehensible to the ego. And so they're like, yes. And then there are things that come through that are not, they're like beyond the how the brain likes to categorize and stuff, and they just feel so nebulous. So
This is interesting because I feel like you're talking about that divine masculine and feminine, where you can the masculine is the logic and the reason in a healthy way. Obviously, we can have unhealthy, and then the feminine is just feeling your way through it and understanding it in a way that you can't necessarily describe. You just have to feel, and that's what ascension is. You can't logic and reason your way through ascension. You have to just feel it and let your intuition guide your experience and knowing, even if your ego self can't find the words to explain exactly what the fuck is going on. Just allow it, I guess. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I feel so floaty right now. So the Atlantis thing was a meditative journey. I had gone on a meditative journey a while back that had a lot of ostriches in it. It was in Australia. There were kangaroos, there were baobab trees, and there were lots of ostriches, female ostriches running around. And ostriches were also part of this journey. I'm trying to remember it now from this floaty place. Okay, let me just pull up my notes on it because I don't want to say this in a super spaced out way. Okay. So the first thing was a cassowary bird guide came for me, which is another large flightless bird. Also lives in that part of the world. I don't know if it's Australia or New Zealand or somewhere around there. Very beautiful. It's got a lot of blue on it. It's a bird that symbolizes our female ancestors and the primal mother. I didn't know that at the time, but I looked up afterwards to see. And it took me into a portal in my heart. And then I felt some heart blockages in my connection to Atlantis being cleared. And then when we came out, we came into this version of Atlantis that was very hazy. It was this beautiful pink, purple, peach, hazy skies, and everything was happening in the sky. And there were these gorgeous staircases and archways in the sky. Everything was very delicate and beautiful. There was like golden architecture everywhere. There were elephants flying in the sky and also with very long stilt legs. There's some Salvador Dali paintings that are kind of similar to what I was seeing. There were giraffes. There was this energy of wonder and awe and spectacle and beauty and magic everywhere. It was like this energy of the Atlantis. And I knew it was a version of Atlantis that I was seeing, just one version of many. So they really loved wonder. They loved spectacle. It was like circus, like that thing. It's like, look what we can do. Yeah, like the elephants flying through the sky were like trapezes and stuff. And there was also a lot of electricity in the air. And each moment was suffused with wonder. What's going to happen next? And it was very like ethereal and kind of dreamy, but things happened very quickly which I think is a common theme with many versions of Atlantis, that it had a very fast, and it wasn't like rushing, but it was just like, there was like a stillness to it, but things just happened really quickly. And then I saw this ostrich racing through, like a portal open, and then this ostrich was like racing through, stampeding with all these other animals. And then I saw these blue-green human-shaped souls being beamed up. And so what it was showing me was two things. They were showing me the beaming up was like we know the history of Atlantis as a cataclysm, and there's a lot of versions that talk about how they were trying to make a leap in their own collective evolutionary spiritual growth to like connect with the broader universe in this way, and it didn't go as planned, and they had a very quick descension that was like super traumatic. But the version I was seeing was the version that succeeded. So even though it was quick, it succeeded. And the ostriches and the animals stampeding through the portal, so the flightless bird was showing me the ones who didn't ascend. They didn't fly. They stayed on the ground and played out the timelines on Earth, including the ones that we're in now. And so there's a lot of matriarchal energy as well. So the space was like a very matriarchal, which I've also heard other people describe Atlantis as matriarchal. But basically, it was the time, one of the timelines. There were many timelines where what they did was succeeding. And I think they were showing me this one where it was a more kind of spiritual, ethereal timeline, because it was a bit easier for them to navigate the quick ascension that way than versions that were a bit more, had more of a structure to them that was a little bit more like scientific, that kind of had natural limitations placed in it that was like, uh-oh, something went wrong, and therefore we know scientifically that X, Y, and Z. So it's like, whoop, it's like that kind of thing. And it was basically showing me that, again, when I looked up the cassowary afterwards, there was this whole legend about the cassowary being ashamed of itself for being a flightless bird and all the other animals making fun of itself. And then the legend is like how it finds its own place and its importance. And it was like, which was, I think, what the ostrich journey was showing me too, was like loving the part of ourself and like cherishing the part of ourself that went through that cataclysm, descension, because it's just, it was another experience to experience, and we had to have a way to experience it. It was like whatever limitations we imposed allowed us to experience those timelines. But the parts of ourselves that felt trapped in those timelines and separate from the whole are being gathered. So all those other versions of ourselves that ascended, and there was so many of them, it was like, it seems like it was like the vast majority succeeded, are coming back to gather us as part of that magnetic force. I think that's what like the critical mass, it's like they're just coming in and gathering us into the love, and they really want us to know the value of the descension experience, of the fact that there, of and all the infinite possibilities, there were some where we didn't succeed, and yes, it was very traumatic, and yes, it was very cataclysmic, and yes, we felt very isolated and separate, but it was still another way of experiencing reality, and we're still valuable, and we still just as valuable as any other part. It's like really showing the value of failure as well, like failure quotes or whatever, like that the parts of you that fail are just like so inherently lovable and valuable, and bring new understanding that the parts that succeeded didn't have access to, right? So they need us as well. And I think it was just clearing a lot. There's a lot of baggage, especially between Lemuria and Atlantis, where a lot of baggage there, a lot of resentment from Lemuria about, it's like, oh, it was Atlantis's fuck up and we experienced, like that kind of stuff that we still play out today, right? We play that out today with assigning humans as the role of the villains, right? It's like, oh, because of their fuck ups, all of society has to pay, right? The patriarchy or whatever, right? And it's like, but the versions of the Lemurians that experienced the cataclysm had also called it in their own way as an experience. Like the versions that experienced it were prepared to have that experience, and they played a part. They weren't, because if they hadn't played the part, they just like, if you anyway, if you had a comet shooting towards a planet and the planet was just not also ready to magnetize the comet towards it, the comet would not reach the planet. Anyway, so it was like clearing some of that. It was clearing the guilt, the shame, the embarrassment. A lot of, for me, it's embarrassment is a big one. And that resentment of like, and bitterness of like, it's like the parts that turned inward and were like, oh my God, we fucked up so bad. And the parts that projected outwards and was like, oh my God, you fucked up so bad. And now look at it. It's clearing a lot of that stuff. And it was showing how 2021 was a repeat of that, to clear that wound again in a less, still traumatic, but less traumatic way of like, we're quickly ascending. Oh, didn't happen the way we thought. And like, we're like experiencing all this bullshit now. It was showing how
that explains the karmic washing machine. That's like, we really had to face all of that shit before we could release it. And it felt like a fucking karmic washing machine. That makes so much sense.
Yeah. And I mean, so much of my integration process was about seeing every part of like every person in my life as a part of my whole, and things that I wanted to blame them for, project outwards onto them, like seeing that corresponding part with myself and finding acceptance and forgiveness for it. And then also the parts of myself that felt like horrible and guilty and like, like just naturally on their own, having more compassion and love and acceptance for them as well. But like, I don't know, it was just like showing it to me as like the Atlantis integration timeline.
This is awesome. This is like what you're describing just sounds like a computer simulation. And I don't mean that in like a life is meaningless, we just live in a computer simulation. I mean, like, how cool is it that it can be like a computer simulation at a whatever certain soul level higher up that we're just like playing it out. But then like sparks of actual consciousness are playing out literally every fucking timeline. And it feels like we're kind of bringing it back into like one, I don't know how to describe it in my head. It's showing up as like, there's like a massive amount of lines kind of like blah, blah, and we're kind of like clearing them up and unsnarling them and kind of bringing them back into one, which doesn't mean those other timelines didn't happen. It just means that they're now in this like harmony of a story where this happened and this happened, this, blah, 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 and it's now like you can read it not linearly, because none of this is very linear, but you can read it in a way that makes sense because we have all experienced every single fucking possibility that could ever happen. I think that's pretty amazing, but hopefully nobody's taking that as like a life is meaningless kind of thing.
Yeah,
That was
no,
cool.
that's a great way to put it. And the part, as I was saying it today, the part that came through that I hadn't yet come through was the part about how they needed us to experience the failure part.
I really love that
they-
you said that, because
they
it's just like
needed-
those parts of us. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, just, yeah, that they needed like the whatever that was gained from that, the experience, wisdom, love, whatever.
Yeah, I was so happy that you said that too, because and that came through, because it was kind of like us describing our parts, that we're not having an agenda to heal. It's like they're just as valuable. They're part of evolution. You need to love them and have them. It's like we are the inner mouse of those other timelines, and it's like we are just as loved, and nothing is a failure. It's all information gathering, data gathering, and all these points for the greater story as a whole. And if we hadn't been who we are and doing all the things that we've been doing, and anyway, just fucking around and finding out kind of stuff, we wouldn't have this amazing creation story. So yeah, it has felt really shitty a lot of the time. And I'm not going to gaslight myself into thinking it hasn't felt shitty, but like it feels really nice knowing, being sort of mostly on the other side of that, where no, I know it, I'm not like completely healed and we're still evolving and all that stuff, but it feels so much more peaceful and soothing to me to know that I am also loved. And I've never, the amount of times I felt like a failure, it's not true. And I can feel the not truth of that in a way that I actually do feel loved and important, and just valuable in a way that I haven't ever let myself feel before. And this is really helping me embrace that feeling of the love that my higher self has for me, that I've tended to doubt a lot of times because things have felt so shitty. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like all the things that, the thought loops and spirals. And it's like, you're doing nothing wrong. You're doing perfectly. And we could not do this without you. So give yourself some fucking credit, because you're amazing sparks of consciousness.
Yeah. I just, I think it's like, what does it mean for the future in linear time to have those parts come in? I don't know.
I feel like we're just in the middle of creating new stories. Like
Yeah.
it's not that we're not quite there yet, because we're not, but we also are. Everything is true at the same time. But in linear time, it feels a little bit like.
And it's like, I think it's the thing that kind of feels like a paradox, but ultimately isn't, where it's like, you accept that the suffering and the trauma, had their own inherent value to them, but that doesn't mean that we need to continue our experience from that perspective of separateness and isolation that like caused the trauma and the it's like both of those things. It's because I know it just always makes me think of like, I know there's some spiritual people who were like really opposed to finding value in any kind of value or learning in trauma and pain and suffering, because they think it keeps us trapped in it endlessly, like examining and staying in that instead of moving on from it. And I understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, me too. But also,
but yeah, it's like then you shove those parts of you away again. Then you're like shoving, and putting it outside of yourself. I don't know. I think it's just inexpressible to me still what it looks like when we are what those experiences that did have their own value are going to look like when we're simply less magnetically drawn to separateness and conflict and scarcity and things like that.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those things that we're probably going to be probably. Okay, that was, we're going to be coming back to this episode to be like, however many, months, years, whatever the fuck from now, and be like, remember when we couldn't describe it because we couldn't see it and we didn't know how to have the words? It's like, now we do. And it's like, this is sort of a time capsule of like, yeah, this is before we've made it to that point, and now we can come back and be like, here's the details of how these stories are unfolding, and we couldn't see it at the time because we weren't supposed to, and now we've created all these amazing new stories, and what does that look like, looking back? So Back to the Future. Here we go.
Exactly. But it was very loving and very gentle, and anyway, it's just,
that's awesome. That was a really cool. I've heard some of that, but I hadn't heard all of it. It was especially the new stuff that came through, and I really,
yeah, the part where they needed us was really nice, because there's like,
yeah,
that whole thing, it's like they're coming to get us, like that feels good, but it also feels like, I don't know, it's just like, I think there was a part of it subconsciously that was still bothering me. It's like, oh, they come to get us, and we're like the lowly little scraps that they come with their wonderful uniqueness come and like collect into their bosom and stuff. Like, we just have to be grateful that they come for us or something. Like, not that that's how it was presented, but like there was that thing.
Oh yeah, we have
Like,
egos, man.
It is like very needed in the whole.
Yeah, it was very heartwarming. Very, very heartwarming. And I needed to hear that, especially because the last few weeks have just not been very soothing. I've been doing my best to soothe myself, and I've gotten to good places, but I feel like every time we talk, something comes through that just really brings me back home to myself. So thanks for hoisting up the majority of this episode while I sort of just take in the wisdom. I'm like, yeah, Zadikat with the good shit.
Well, it always helps me to say things because then they become slightly clearer to me. Like we saw, like a new thing comes through too. So thank you. I feel like you were helping provide some structure. It's like, and this and this and this. There's so many. I know they don't fit together too. Like
they do.
But
you did a good job bringing it all back home. This was fun.
Oh, there was one last thing, but it's gone. It connected. Dang. No. I guess it's not meant for this episode. That's okay. But
we've got plenty of other episodes to record.
Yeah, I like literally, I can tell you from a place, just like I can tell you that literal miracles are possible for anybody to participate in and experience. Not you specifically, but I can tell anybody. I can say with a sense of like, yes, this is true, that anybody can participate and experience a miracle because I have done so and I know it's truth. I also can feel and know that the gentleness is here. Like I feel the part of being out of the haunted house and in the gentler. And I feel it in my external reality. I've started to feel it in little ways. It's creeping in. And so I know that if I feel something, I know that if anyone else can feel it, and also that it's going into the collective, like it's going to be. So if you are listening to this and still feeling like you're in the haunted house, and which I also feel that parts of me still are.
Me too.
Like I can say that with 100% certainty.
Yeah.
That the external gentleness part, the part where it starts to be mirrored back, and it's not, these aren't big things. I'm trying to think of like, it's just like, for me, it has a lot to do with making mistakes or fucking up and stuff. And it's just like, it doesn't have the same fallout, even just energy wise, of like having to like talk to somebody for a long time about, that kind of thing where you had to like, and then you had to hear from them and take it, and and so you have to like go in or like do all this work to like it's not taking, it's like much gentler. And there's like little gentle things making their way into my reality to like cushion my reality. Oh, I got these new freaking ear things that finally there's something that addresses my sound sensitivity. So when I go outside now, it's these little.
Wait, what are these? I want these.
Calmer. Okay, here's a great example. here is a fantastic example. I kept seeing ads for them and I had just given up hope about anything being able to help my misophonia, I have so many sound triggers. And anyway, I basically tried one thing and gave up in a huge rage. But I tried noise canceling headphones, but that's actually not helpful at all for what I have.
I don't find it helpful either. Yeah.
Yeah, because it just like you're like, okay, now everything's really quiet, so I hear the noises that bother me even more.
I know.
So these are called Calmer, and I was seeing these ads for them everywhere. And these little rubber, tiny little, I got the minis, which is nice too, because they make them extra small if you hate the feeling of something inside your ear. So you put them in like earbuds, kind of, and they're just these little rubber things. And what they do is they take the vibrations of certain sounds and frequencies that are like especially grating, and they absorb them. So when you're walking around, it's just like you're walking around like normal, like you're just not bombarded with those particular things. So for me, it's stuff like sirens and screechy brakes when I walk around the city. Those things like drain me so quickly, and there's so much noise in Toronto. And when I walk around with these, when I first tried them, I was like, oh, I don't know if they're working or if I'm just having a really quiet day. Like, it's hard to tell. And it took me a few times. I was like, no, this is going good.
Wow.
So like sirens going by just don't activate my nervous system the way they used to. It's just really weird because it doesn't feel like, it's like doesn't affect how you hear. It doesn't muffle, but it just
Wow.
changes sound quality. So
I definitely
like
just opened a tab.
Yeah.
I opened a tab and I'm like, I am putting that into my search bar and gonna look at those later.
Yes, Calmer. I highly recommend to anyone who, like, if you have certain sounds that, especially higher pitch, like that kind of stuff, they work really well for. So that is a wonderful example of like the type of thing that has started coming in to be like, hey, there's solutions. Hey, it doesn't have to be so quite so rough. Hey, it's like, it's okay. Just like little things like that. And I really feel them. Like, I feel them so emotionally. I'm like, this is it. This is the nice part. Like, this is the beginning of the nice part, you know, the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. I could, as you were talking, I was like, I feel all of this very viscerally in my body too. It's starting to flow in and be reflected outward, that peaceful, that ease. Yeah. There are solutions, you know, things are getting better. And every day we get closer, just every fucking day. And I keep reminding myself when I'm having a bad day, I just say, even if I feel like nothing is going right, I remind myself, I am in alignment. Every day I am moving closer to my, whatever it is that I'm here to be doing. And already I'm doing my job. Like, just remember, if there's a part of me that's like getting frustrated that I'm not doing my job or whatever, it's like, you're already doing it. Also, you're already in alignment. You are on your highest timeline.
Yeah.
You know, moving towards your highest joy.
We got 1 billion messages in the month of March that we were already done. We'd already done the thing. We didn't have to do any more leaping or jumping. We were already where we needed to be. It's like, you're here, you've arrived. Just
Yep. And things are early too. We keep getting messages about things that have already happened. Like, I know we talked about this in our last podcast about like, yeah, we talked about it last, where it was like, I had 4, you know, astrology things that happened a day earlier than I thought, in the past, you know, December and January. And then other things that kept coming through about like, it's already happened. Like, something you said, oh, the manatee is no longer in danger. Like, that's already happened. Like, and then just this morning, I saw a little Twitter post about a baby bat that had been born early. And anyway, just, oh yeah. And somebody else I was talking to, they were quoting lyrics to a song that was in their dream or in their head or something like that. I think it was a Fall Out Boy song. And they were like, the lyrics were something about, I set my clocks early because I'm afraid of being late or something like that. And I was just like, again, with the whole, like, we are early, like, don't be afraid of being late. You're literally already early. I was like, all right, I'll take it.
yeah,
highest
you all
timeline.
get
Here we go.
messages about us being early that are really soothing for me.
Me too. Me too. Lord. Yeah.
Wow. Woo.
This was good, man. Thanks for getting all that out. It was very, very nice to just take in all of those frequencies and that wisdom. Thanks for
Sweet.
sharing.
My
Yeah.
pleasure.
Anything else you've got? Or you
think I'm
feeling pretty
spent.
good about?
had a huge monsoon downpour while I spoke about certain parts. I forget which parts.
Yeah, we're
Awesome.
both having thunderstorms today. That's
You-
pretty cool.
You predicted when we were doing the Oracle spread that it was going to be a rainy year, and yeah, it's been.
I forgot I did that.
Yeah. Also, things
love the
happening
rain.
quickly. I mean, yes, I will say that concurrent to things happening really leisurely and like taking more rest, things happening really quickly has been happening also, like the weather changing insane rapidly, and then also the animals. I've been calling in, seeing animals, and I wanted to see more mammals because I saw a lot of birds, and like ever since I called it in, I've been seeing them, and it's been happening very fast. And it was, I was like, whoa,
That's
I saw
awesome.
a coyote and then a beaver for the
So
first
cool.
time in my life
So
yesterday,
cool.
and then 2 days ago, and then
Yeah.
last week.
I actually wanted to say one last thing about your Oracle spread that we did last time. And one of the things I'd experienced as far as what you had drawn up in your Oracle thing of the baby, was it a lion the baby male lion who wanted to play, and then the female leopard who was resting and was like, oh,
Yes.
I don't want to play today, but maybe tomorrow or whatever. And so I had this just one experience, but still it was like a good example of things that I can, keep in mind for what's happening throughout this year. Is I had this day where I was I felt like all this masculine energy where I was like, I got things done. I just did things that I've been wanting to do, but felt like I had no energy to do. And I did it all. I followed my energy the way it wanted to be used. I did the things my body was moving towards. I forget what I even did at this point, but basically I had a big energy producing day. And then the next day I could feel like I was joking to you via text. I was like, oh my God, I feel like this Victorian lady who like has 5 minutes of activity and has to spend 6 months in bed. It's like, I just laid in bed like a lot of the day. I didn't feel bad about it. It felt like a really good, delicious rest. And I was like, oh, this is like Zadikat's Oracle thing where the masculine energy wants to play and do things. And then the feminine can either overpower you, like it has been the past few years where we've all felt like we've been wiped the fuck out and like smashed into the couch nest, or else like we literally can't fucking do anything. And it's like, you can either allow her to do that if you keep trying to use that masculine energy to get things done, or you can follow your body when it's saying, okay, now it's a rest day after that. I think I even had 2 rest days after that whole thing. And it was just a delicious experience of, wow, I am moving with my energy and doing things. And it doesn't feel like I'm forcing myself to like, oh my God, I have to clean the bathroom. Oh my God, I got to clean the bathroom. It was like a thing I wanted to do. And a bunch of other stuff. And then it was like, now I get to rest. Wow, I feel delicious in my bed right now. So just wanted to bring that up as another thing that's coming true from your Oracle spread. It's a really cool experience. So
That's awesome. Yeah, the way you described that was like very soothing when it happened. I really appreciated hearing about it. There's something about the daddy's part that I still haven't quite figured out.
I can't wait for that to come online.
Daddies are like helping us, like the daddy energy, but I'm looking forward to like untangling. Yeah, I'm calling it in, like I want to call it in like pretty soon to like have an understanding
right now.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. I have to pee,
okay,
but there's something I want to talk to you about off air. So
okay, sounds good. Well, lots of love to everybody. We're getting there. We're in alignment. We're on the highest timeline. You got this.
We are there. It's
We're
okay.
there.
It takes a while for it to sink in.
Yeah.
You are here. Bye.
You are here.